In the evening, when the hallway smells of dust and old wires, the intercom clicks briefly, as if someone pressed the button and immediately removed their finger. It is quiet outside the window, with only the occasional footsteps in the courtyard, but a dull, crackling sound, like breathing, can be heard from the receiver. A young woman stands in the kitchen, drying her hands with a towel and waiting for someone to come up. But no one comes. Only the light on the panel flashes 3 times and goes out. Announcer, in a calm voice. Hello, friends. Today's story is about a house where memories do not belong to people. Write in the comments where you are listening to this story. It's interesting to know where you have quiet nights and where you don't. Enjoy listening. They moved there in early fall when the old house was being demolished, and the landlord assured them that everything is new, everything is connected. A young man with his wife and child. He worked nights, moonlighting as a courier after his shift at the warehouse, while she worked remotely, and didn't like to be alone. The intercom was one of those old ones, with a handset yellowed by time and a cord twisted at the base. The apartment seemed like a temporary shelter, but everything was above board. A deposit, a contract, receipts. Nothing strange happened during the first week. Only at night, there was a short ring. Once, a click, a pause, as if someone was checking the line. My husband said it could be a broken wire or a neighbor calling. Then he added that he would call the service company himself. But he didn't call. He didn't have time. Home, work, child, fatigue. His wife began to notice that the calls were repeated at the same time, around 2 in the morning, when he was returning from deliveries. Sometimes she would get up, pick up the phone, listen to a noise that sounded like an echo, and hang up. She thought she heard her name, but she couldn't make it out. It was like an old tape recorder playing an empty tape. On the 3rd day, after another call, the apartment number flashed on the display. Their own. Her husband smiled and said that the intercom was probably mixing up the lines because it was an old unit. In the morning, he took off the cover and looked inside. Everything was intact. The wires weren't corroded, but one sticker inside had been reattached. On the yellow paper, the old initials and date from 10 years ago were barely legible. In the neighborhood chat, he asked who had installed the intercom. No one answered. Only a woman from the lower floor wrote that this model is not from this building at all. It used to be installed in dormitories. A week later, they received their first service bill, which listed 2 apartment numbers, theirs and some old one separated by a slash. He thought it was a mistake, but when he went to the management company, it turned out that this line belonged to a subscriber who had long since deregistered. The accountant said that the account was frozen in the system, but for some reason, it still appeared on the bills. That evening, when he returned home, his wife said she had heard a conversation, hers and his. It was as if the intercom had repeated their argument from the previous day. Words about money, about noise, about how everything is temporary. He didn't believe it, but when he picked up the phone, he really did hear a short segment. His voice, tired, even, saying that nothing is happening. From that moment on, he began to notice other little things. The camera on the floor sometimes flashed when he walked by. even when the light was off. Someone had left an old key in the box near the elevator, similar to the intercom key. There was a scratch in the shape of a letter on the mailbox door, as if someone had tried to insert a magnet. At first, he thought it was fatigue, that it was just a coincidence when different little things came together. But one morning, returning from the night shift, he heard a quiet rustle coming from the receiver, as if someone was standing at the door and breathing. He pressed the button, but instead of a voice, he heard a short beep, and his own phrase came out of the speaker, with the exact same intonation, only slightly lower. "Don't open it." He froze. The stairwell was empty. Only on the lower floor did someone slam a door, and the smell of dust rose up the shaft. He picked up the phone again. Silence. Then, to check himself, he turned on the phone's voice recorder and recorded everything. The recording reveals a short ring, a pause. Then his voice, older, as if from afar. He didn't tell anyone. But since then, he began checking the intercom call log. It stored the dates and apartment numbers from which the calls came. Their own number often appeared on the list, as if someone was calling themselves from inside. A few days later, he decided to go down to the basement to check the distribution box. The janitor, an old man with a perpetually tired face, gave him the key. He said that the basement was now closed, but it's okay for residents. There, among boxes and old pipes, he found a cabinet with lots of wires. One of them had a tag with his last name on it, even though the installation had been done long before they moved in. Nearby was a dusty box with notes from previous residents. One of them was written in small handwriting. "If your voice calls you, don't answer." He returned home late. His wife was already asleep, and their child was snoring quietly in the other room. The apartment was silent, except for the hum of the refrigerator. He wanted to tell her, but decided not to scare her. He simply picked up the receiver, pulled out the wire, and left it like that. The intercom fell silent. However, during the night, his phone turned on by itself. The screen lit up as if a notification had arrived. He picked it up, and the screen displayed a missed call labeled intercom. There was no number, only the time, exactly when he had pulled out the cord. From that moment on, his anxiety began to grow. Every evening, he heard the same thing in the house, as if someone was walking around the floor and stopping at the doors. In the morning, there were dust marks on the rug, as if someone had been standing there, hesitating to ring the bell. On the video from the home camera, there was only a black shadow, indistinguishable due to the glare. His wife increasingly said that the intercom seemed to repeat the residents' phrases. Greetings, farewells, random words. Once, she said she heard the voice of a neighbor who had left a month ago. He turned on the recording, and sure enough, a woman's voice could be heard above the noise, saying, "Give me the key." He remembered that old key from the box by the elevator. At the time, he had kept it, thinking it belonged to someone else. Now he took it out and examined it. It had a letter engraved on it, similar to the scratch on the mailboxes. Everything fit together. He went to the janitor to ask who had lived in their apartment before. The old man looked at him and said he didn't know. People come and go, but then he added, if something repeats itself, it means someone hasn't left completely. Since then, he began to wake up to short sounds, as if the intercom was alive again, although the wire remained unplugged. One night, he heard the signal again, short and insistent. There was a hissing sound in the receiver. Then his voice, tired and unfamiliar, said, "Don't open it." And he understood that it was a warning, but not from someone outside, from himself, from the one who had already opened the door once. He didn't immediately understand what the warning meant. Don't open it. That night, he just sat in the kitchen without turning on the light and listened for a long time to the refrigerator humming and the occasional sound of cars on the street. It seemed to him that the house itself was breathing, evenly, muffled, like a person asleep under a thick blanket. He felt that if he got up and went out into the hallway, something would change irrevocably. In the morning, his wife said that he had been talking in his sleep, as if arguing with someone. She couldn't make out the words, only the last ones. There's no one there. There was another dust mark on the rug by the door, but this time it was different, as if someone had been standing facing the exit, and that alarmed him the most. That day, he noticed that there were fingerprints on the intercom screen. Although the cord was still lying to one side, the screen had somehow turned on and was displaying a list of calls. Among them were new entries, all from their own number. He took a photo of the screen so he could check the time later. Each call coincided with the moments when one of them returned home. At first, this could be attributed to a system malfunction, but in the evening, his wife found a strange receipt on the mail shelf, addressed to a woman who had lived there before. The address matched, but the date of issue was 6 years ago. She wanted to throw it away, but in small print at the bottom, it said, "The subscriber has been notified of the termination of service. The reason is death." After that, they had their first real fight. She demanded that they move out, saying that the apartment had bad energy. He replied that it was all a coincidence and that the intercom signal was just a broken circuit. She locked herself in her room and didn't come out until morning. When he woke up, there was a piece of paper on the table with her handwriting. "If they call again, don't answer the phone." He went to work earlier than usual, but all day long, he couldn't shake the feeling that someone was in the apartment. When he returned at night, he immediately looked at the intercom panel. It glowed with a dim, steady light. There were new entries in the call log. The last one was a few minutes before he arrived. He took out his phone, turned on the camera, and filmed everything. The entrance to the building, the elevator, the hallway. Then he began to compare the footage. In one of the videos, the reflection in the elevator mirror was different. The figure was standing a step behind, even though he was alone. He rewound it, zoomed in. For a split second, the reflection did not match the movement. It was as if someone was late in repeating his step. The neighbors hadn't heard anything. Only the woman from the floor below, the one who had responded in the chat earlier, said that her intercom also rang at night, but then she added that her device had been turned off since spring. He decided to check everything himself. He opened the panel on the staircase where the wires ran and noticed that there were not one but two cables coming from his apartment. The second one was thinner, older, and led down to the basement. The tag had the letter R on it, and next to it was the old installation date. The same mark was on the key he found by the elevator. He took out the key and returned to the basement. The lock on the distribution board fit. Inside was dust, cut wires, and an old cassette tape. There were no labels on it. He took it home and inserted it into an old tape recorder that had once belonged to his wife. The tape cracked when he rewound it, but he managed to play a short fragment. A hum, breathing, then a woman's voice whispering, "Don't open it, if yours calls." He turned it off and sat for a long time, staring at the wall. Now everything made sense. That voice, that phrase, everything repeating itself. Only it wasn't clear who spoke first, them or the intercom. The next day, a man from the service company arrived. He introduced himself as an equipment technician. He said that the wiring was outdated and the module needed to be replaced. He showed his ID, and the name was familiar, the same as on the old receipt. My husband shrugged and let him in. While the technician was working on the panel, my wife asked him where he had worked before. He replied, "In this building, before the relocation. Then they didn't hire anyone else here." He left, leaving a receipt and his phone number. In the evening, they noticed that the intercom was working again, even though the wire he had pulled out was still lying there. That same night, his wife woke up to a quiet voice. At first, she thought it was their child talking in their sleep. But when she got up, she realized the sound was coming from the phone. It was the same whisper, repeating the same words. She recorded it on her phone and showed it to her husband. He listened and turned pale. It was her voice, but it was saying something she had never said. "He's already here." They didn't sleep until morning. In the morning, he called the repairman's number. In response, he heard short beeps, then a recording. "The number is not in service." He called the company directly. They said they didn't have such an employee and never had. He began to recall what he looked like: average height, wearing gray overalls with a bag of tools. Ordinary. Only one thing was strange. He had a badge on his chest with the letter R instead of a name. The same one that was on the key and on the wire. Now he could no longer convince himself that it was a coincidence. The intercom seemed to be collecting voices, repeating them, connecting them together, as if someone on the other end of the line was recording not people, but their shadows. He opened the camera recordings installed at the entrance. In one of the frames, the repairman is standing at the door. But when he turns around, his face blurs as if the camera cannot focus. From that moment on, he began to document everything. The time, phone calls, strange signals. And he noticed a pattern. Every time the intercom rang by itself. The next morning, someone in the house did not return on time. One day, the courier did not come. Another day, a neighbor didn't open the door. Then there was a letter in the elevator, left without an address, with only one sentence: "We are still in line." It seemed that someone was deliberately keeping the system working, as if not letting it fall silent. A few days later, the sound disappeared from the apartment. Neither the TV nor the phone, nor even the alarm clock worked. Only the intercom hummed quietly, like a bee under glass. He picked up the phone and heard himself, only with pauses, like on an old recording. The voice said, "Don't open it. It's too late." He put the receiver back and realized that the warning sounded closer each time, as if the voice were moving through the floors. At night, the light on the panel flashed twice. He walked over, ran his finger over the button, and the screen lit up. On it was a list of calls. The last one, entrance from inside. He looked at his wife. She was standing in the doorway, pale, with the phone in her hand. On her screen was a missed call labeled intercom. Same time. They both listened as the phone clicked quietly. Then there was a pause, then the signal again. This time, it was a child's voice. Their son was asleep, but they could hear him breathing through the speaker. His wife fell to her knees, grabbed the cord, and pulled it out completely. The screen went dark. The house fell silent. They exhaled, as if they had been waiting out a storm. But when he looked at his phone, a message flashed. "New line installed." The intercom icon now appeared in the list of devices, as if it had connected to the network. The next day, he took the phone to the service center and demanded that it be deregistered. They were surprised and said that their apartment had never been connected to the intercom line because the equipment had been dismantled 2 years ago. He walked home in the rain. The light was on in the stairwell, but the door opened without a key. On the doorstep lay the same old key he had thrown away a week ago. He looked up. The intercom panel on the wall was clean, like new. Only on the screen was a short phrase, as if typed from someone else's voice. "We're already inside." And then he realized that the device wasn't receiving signals. It was transmitting. Everything it had heard over the years was now being sent back through voices, footsteps, memory. He sat down on the floor, pressing the tube to his knees. There was a quiet hiss from the speaker. Then his own voice said barely audibly, "Don't open it." He woke up in the kitchen as dawn was breaking. The smell of musty wiring filled the air, and on the table lay the receiver from which he had torn the cord yesterday. Only the cord was back in place, neatly inserted, as if someone had put everything back together while they slept. His wife and child were breathing quietly in the room, and for a moment it seemed to him that he could just forget about it all. But the intercom screen glowed with a soft green light, and under the dim glare, the words, "Line check complete," appeared. He went back to the basement. The door was open, even though he had locked it yesterday. Inside, it was empty. The covers had been removed, and the wires were neatly coiled. Only a piece of paper with greasy fingerprints lay on the floor. He picked it up. It was a printed table. The surnames of the residents opposite them. The the dates of installation of the equipment, and the note, transfer. His surname was Last next to it, yesterday's date. He felt a chill run down his spine. Transfer. Where? To what list? A thought flashed through his mind. Perhaps those who disappeared were simply transferred to this line, to the network, where their voices live instead of their bodies. He didn't believe in obscurantism, but something inside him wouldn't let him rest. In the evening, he tried to explain it to his wife, but she listened silently, clutching her mug so tightly that her knuckles turned white. Then she said that at night, she heard children's laughter ringing in the intercom and went to check it out. There was no one there, but a child's hand appeared on the wall near the panel, a dust print, as if someone had pressed it against the glass from the other side. Every day, it became more difficult to separate reality from echoes. The neighbors began to move out. The elevator got stuck between floors more and more often, and the announcements on the board, the ones he hadn't noticed before, now seemed like part of one big message. They repeated the same letter R, written in the corners like a signature. He decided to find out who had developed this intercom model. Through old forums and service websites, he found archived data. The manufacturer had long since gone bankrupt, but there was a strange detail in the description. A system with a voice identification of residence function. In the technical notes, in small print, it said, if the identifier is lost, duplication is allowed based on the residual signal. Residual signal. That means the device stores voice prints, even if the person no longer lives there, even if they are no longer there. He remembered the cassette from the basement. He took out the tape recorder again and rewound it to the end. There, between the noises, another word came through that he hadn't noticed before. The voice said, replace. He realized that it was all waiting for someone to free up the line, for someone to leave. The intercom wasn't just recording. It was rewriting the residence, erasing previous voices with a new echo. And if someone left, a trace remained, which the system reproduced until it received a new user. He was alarmed that not a single neighbor had appeared in the last week. The janitor had also disappeared somewhere, the trash wasn't being taken out, and there was a lock on the door of the management company. The city seemed to be thinning around him, like a picture losing its sharpness. He tried to leave. He packed his things, but the door to the entrance wouldn't open. The key fit, but the lock didn't click. Then he decided to call the delivery service. He ordered water, just to see if the courier would arrive. An hour later, the phone rang. The receiver vibrated. A strange name appeared on the screen. He didn't answer, but heard a man's voice, almost a whisper, coming from the speaker. Open up. It's me. He couldn't take it anymore. He grabbed the phone and shouted for it to be quiet. And at that moment, he heard a child crying from deep within the speaker. A short cry, as if someone was afraid of the light. He dropped the phone, sat down on the floor, and cried for the first time. When he came to his senses, the apartment was quiet. Only a piece of paper hung on the wall It had text printed on it. Subscriber transferred, contact confirmed. Below that was the time, accurate to the second. The exact moment he picked up the phone. Every day, the intercom grew quieter. It no longer rang or spoke. Only the screen turned on for a moment, as if someone were checking the connection. His wife sat by the window more and more often and did not answer when he called her. The child stopped laughing. Sometimes he caught himself hearing her voice not from the room, but from the receiver. He went to the basement again. Now it was impossible to enter. The lock had been changed, and the door had been sealed with metal tape. A new sign hung on it. Line service completed. No signature, no stamp. Only a number that looked like a phone number, but was too short. He wrote down the number, went home, and dialed it. In response, he heard long beeps. Then the voice of an answering machine, cold and emotionless. The subscriber is available on an internal line. He didn't sleep that night. He wrote on the wall, noting the time when the light came on, when the elevator buzzed, when the screen flashed. Everything coincided with his own movements, only with a delay of a few seconds. It was as if the intercom wasn't watching, but repeating. On the third day, when his wife left to visit her sister, he was left alone. The intercom came to life again. It flashed and beeped. He picked up the receiver. This time he heard himself, only younger. The voice said that she couldn't be left alone. Then children's laughter. Then silence. He realized that each recording was not just a repetition, but the memory of the house itself. The house remembers who lived in it, who left, who died. And when a new person comes, it reproduces the old voices until they are replaced by new ones. He pulled out the wire, smashed the panel, removed the entire system, and threw it out the window. But when he went out onto the staircase, he heard the ringing again. First from afar, then right behind the wall. He ran downstairs, banging on the railing. The basement was now lit up. The door was open. Inside were rows of panels connected to the network. Each one flashed its name. Among them, he saw his own. On the screen, under his name, was a new message. Recording complete. He stepped closer and heard his own voice. No longer coming from the receiver, but as if from the air. He was saying the same words he had heard the first time, but now he knew who they were addressed to. Don't open it. He turned toward the door, but there was a shadow standing there. His height, his posture. Only his face was blurred, like in the recording. And when he tried to take a step, he realized that the shadow was moving faster. For a second, everything went dark. The lights, the screens, the air seemed to be sucked in. Then there was a flash and silence. In the morning, the neighbors found the apartment door open. Everything inside was in place. Belongings, documents, even a mug with dried coffee. Only the intercom panel sparkled with new glass, and the first name on the call list was his own. Now, if you listen carefully at night when there is a draft in the hallway, you can hear a short signal. The intercom sighs as if trying to remember a voice, and someone quietly says, "Don't open it."